Now, last night we learnt of the first migrant removal to Rwanda. All it took was a £3,000 bribe, free room and board for 5 years, and a voluntary agreement from the migrant concerned. Well, that first removal may have been conducted softly, but the less voluntary aspect of the Rwanda partnership is now also underway, in force, with the Home Office today releasing footage of some of the migrants earmarked for removal being bungled into immigration enforcement vans and detained. Well, might this be the Rwandan scheme finally getting off the ground? Or is there still a long way to go? Let's speak with Nigel Farage now, GB News presenter and honorary president of Reform UK, live from the United States. Nigel, looks very sunny where you are. I'm deeply jealous. But clearly what the Home Office has been doing today is, above everything else, a communications operation showing that they're getting tough.
Well, all of it is, isn't it? I mean, the news that we got last night, the Sun newspaper talking about this being an historic move with this migrant going to Rwanda. Just get a sense of perspective on this. This is somebody who illegally came to Britain, wasn't granted asylum, which is unusual of itself, and then given 3,000 quid of taxpayers' money to voluntarily board a plane to Rwanda, where he'll be able to live for 5 years without rent, and in a country where $3,000 goes a long way. And it's ludicrous to link that to the Rwanda plan that was set out by Boris Johnson 2 years ago. No, this government is in desperate trouble, dire trouble. You know, predictions of perhaps this coming general election, the worst results ever in their nearly 200 years of existence. And Sunak knows this issue of people illegally crossing our borders and being allowed to stay is driving voters, particularly the Red Wall, mad. So the fact that today they've started rounding up a few people illegally and detaining them, on the face of it, you have to give them credit for. I mean, several years too late, but on the face of it, let's give them credit. The problem is, I suspect, this is where the problems are just beginning. We will see all sorts of other people on that list simply disappear off into the community and be virtually impossible to find. And for those that we do have in detention and plan to take to Rwanda, that is when the lawyers and the judges will kick in. We are still signatories to the European Convention on Human Rights. We've incorporated it into British law by the Human Rights Act. And whatever the Rwanda Act says, in terms of it taking supremacy over the Human Rights Act, I would tell you that when this comes to court, British judges will rule in favour of our international agreement. So it's all well and good sounding tough, but can you actually deliver? And Tom, I still really doubt it.
Nigel, what the government would say there is that the Rwanda bill disapplies multiple sections of the Human Rights Act. On the face of the bill, it says that they can't guarantee that this bill, now this act, I should say, meets ECHR obligations. And it demands that judges follow British law, which is under our system generally regarded as supreme, over any international obligation. Do you not think that's worth the paper it's written on?
No, I don't. I mean, it may well be that disapplying those sections of the Human Rights Act works in British law, but we are still a signatory to an international treaty via that court in Strasbourg, and I just don't see a Conservative Prime Minister overruling a judgment of that court. Do you know what? If he did, half of his own party would be in rebellion. Many Conservatives support us being part of that European Convention. Now, if he does it, it'll be very brave and bold, but I believe that an international treaty is what would take precedent, and I think our judges and ultimately our Supreme Court would rule that way. Look, I hope I'm wrong. I'm sick to death of thousands every month of these young men, undocumented young males of fighting age coming into our country about whom we know nothing of their backgrounds and their histories. I hope he can solve it. I just don't believe, all the while we're part of that treaty, that it actually can happen. And really, you know, Brexit should have been about leaving this particular treaty as well. Sadly, it wasn't.
This morning we learnt of the tragic story behind the little girl who was trampled to death on one of those boats that was due to come across the channel. Her father had applied for asylum in multiple countries, 4 EU countries, being turned down time and time and time again before trying to come to the UK. I suppose many would argue that it's the most humanitarian thing to do, to be clear, to stop the ambiguity, to say that actually this is the way to stop people coming across, people who think that EU countries that say no to their asylum application, that the United Kingdom would then say yes. Surely that seems to be the most perverse incentive in the world. It leads desperate people who have been refused by various EU countries to then try their luck in the UK.
Tom, look, this idea of desperate people, I don't doubt amongst some of those that are crossing the English Channel, there are some genuinely fleeing persecution. But the wholesale abuse of our generosity, people pretending they're under 18 when they're in their 30s, people claiming to convert to Christianity from Islam, which of course we know they're not actually doing, people claiming they're gay and therefore can't be sent back to the country that they claim to have originally come from. The whole thing is a complete and utter racket. And I'd remind people, since 2016, we have taken in 500,000 refugees. They've come from Hong Kong, they've come from Afghanistan, they've come from Ukraine and elsewhere. It's not as if we're not the most generous country out there, because we are. What we cannot allow is for human traffickers to put people in dinghies to cross the English Channel. 90% of them are male, 80% of them are very young males. This has got to stop. And the only way we're going to stop it is by not being part of that European Convention and by saying that nobody that comes via this route will ever be allowed to stay. That is what Tony Abbott, the Prime Minister of Australia, did back in 2013, and within 2 weeks the boats stopped coming. That is the only way we're ever going to solve this, and I believe that right from the start.
There's a huge degree of truth there, that to some extent it's not whether or not 1 or 2 migrants go to Rwanda. It's not the fact of 1 plane leaving or 2 planes leaving. It's the scale and regularity and, frankly, almost certainty that those planes, that deportation scheme will work for anyone who crosses irregularly and illegally. Nigel Farage, Honorary President of Reform UK and, of course, GB News presenter, thank you very much for joining us live from Florida. I'll let you get back to your holiday now.